Hello, hello, and welcome to this summer's Fairy Circle. Uh, I'm going to be shifting the format a little bit with NT, so there'll be one or two classes on a specific topic each month. And this month we've got two, and we're starting off with the fair folk and the dead. So this is like a little masterclass with some magic in it for you. And as you can see, I am Halo Quin, and this is run through the Enchanted Academy. So we've already had a question come up, like, by the dead, do you mean our ancestors or the current state of consciousness that is prevailing nowadays? Well, what a question. I hope by the end of it, you have a sense of what I'm talking about. But if not, feel free to ask again. So, just a little bit of brief background. I'm a pagan author, storyteller, and a fairy witch with a PhD in philosophy. So I like asking, but why? So I grew up in southwest England near Avebury, and I moved to Wales almost 20 years ago. So I'm sharing that bit of information, and it'll become clear why in a bit later. But suffice to say, the spirits in different landscapes are ever so slightly different. So this is my background. And I've always been fascinated by fairies, by those spirits that I encountered that I later discovered had a name, fairies. And I was brought up talking to trees and plants and things because my mother's religion is trees and tree hugging, which makes me very happy. So I learned from books. I also learned from experience, and I learned about the fair folk from the fair folk. And you'll notice that I use the terms fairy, fair folk, fae a little bit interchangeably. And that's because the language, like the spelling, varies massively. So it all means the same thing, really. Of course, what does it mean? Just a little recap, if you've been in any of my classes on fairies, I've got a whole talk like exploring what fairies are. But in terms of fairy spirits, this term covers a wide range of beings with contradictory traits sometimes. So there are things that we can say that are common about them. They are always magical. They usually care about this world, and they are often connected with humans, whether they're working with us, asking for our help, living with our ancestors, or coming into conflict with us, or we are encountering them in the world, in what we might describe as in nature, or in the other than human nature. So I found this quote in The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns and Fairies, which is written by Robert Kirk, who is a very famous for his documenting of, well, the Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns and Fairies. So it's quite a famous little chapbook, and it was published several hundred years ago. So you'll notice this is what he says about fairies. These Siths, they call, and please excuse my Irish pronunciation, Slaig Maith, or the good people, are said to be of a middle nature betwixt man and angel, of intelligent, studious spirits and light, changeable bodies, like those called astral, somewhat of the nature of a condensed cloud and best seen in twilight. And I think that's just such a beautiful description of how we encounter these beings, how we experience these beings. They are spirits. They are not bodied in the same way we are, but they're very close to our world. And I like how he says they're somewhat between man and angel, between humanity and obviously being Robert Kirk was a priest. I'm not quite sure exactly what his title was because it's gone out of my head. Some kind of priest. So a man of God. So angel, of course, was his point of reference for like divine, heavenly, expansive spirit. And so the good people, the fair folk, are very close to us, and yet somewhat on a different vibration to us. So I think of fairy as covering those spirits that live close to us energetically. They're spirits of this world, of nature, and of the magical realms that interpenetrate ours. Now, all of these terms are quite vague, so think of them in poetic terms, right? In poetic, as poetic meaning. We're thinking about worlds and realms and magical spaces that are overlapping with and part of ours. And let that sort of sense of that be. They are beings that are similar enough to us to work with, but they're many and varied in kind. Okay. And as I mentioned, there are distinct differences between fairy spirits in different cultures. So, for example, the Germanic Alvar are often described as being somewhat friendlier than the Irish She are said to be. Okay. Then, not necessarily always, but if you hear the stories of the tall, shining ones in the Irish myths, they're often somewhat either combative or disapproving of us, or there's a certain amount of coldness there. Whereas in the Germanic and Scandinavian stories and the Norse myths, the Alvar are often friendlier. They live alongside us, and as long as we don't do something stupid, like, I don't know, bulldoze their homes, they're quite keen on getting along with us. There's, for example, if you go into the home of the Alvar, it's actually often okay if they offer you food to eat it. Whereas with the Irish She, it's not. It said you shouldn't eat food in their realm or you'll stay there forever. So you can see there are already differences. And whether this is differences in the nature of those spirits specifically, or the nature of our relationship to the spirits in those landscapes and in those cultural contexts, it doesn't much matter. There are subtle differences, and it's worth being aware of that. So, wherever it is you are in the world, it's worth getting to know your local fae spirits and your local folklore, the folklore of the land, as best you can. Sometimes the local folklore will be folklore that has travelled with humans that have come and settled in places and colonized places, and they'll have brought their folklore with them. Sometimes that folklore will have travelled with them and then will have become embedded in the land. And sometimes there's, a bit of a gap there. So sometimes it can be tricky to find that. But there are often stories. And if it's hard to find the stories, you can go and ask the trees, the rocks, the wind. So, what's in a name? It's said that you shouldn't give your true name to a spirit because it will give them power over you. Just the same as if you know a spirit's true name, it gives you power over them. And that can be because a name reveals the nature of something and of someone. So Sarah Mastros in one of her recent classes was talking about how actually most humans don't know their true names. We can't give our true names because there is no one name when we are alive and changing and growing. There is no one true name that matches our essence that we can express in the world. I think that that's broadly true. And that for some of us, as we work towards knowing ourselves better, becoming more in alignment with ourselves, becoming true to the core of ourselves, we can sometimes find names that get closer. And those often then become secret names, private names, names between us and our spirits, names between us and ourselves. But anyway, that's an aside. So in English, the earlier word for fairy, so before it was fairy, and that got ascribed to these beings in about the Middle Ages, right? The earlier word was elf, right? So AKA, otherwise known as elves. And this is from the Germanic language. So obviously English coming from the Anglo-Saxon, coming from like bringing those, we're a Germanic, in English it's a Germanic language. So in the Norse and the Germanic, like older mythology, there are different kinds of Alva, including mound elves. And this becomes important, right? And the exact word for them is often translated as dark elves, but not to be confused. The Dock Alva is not to be confused with the Svart Alva. And the Svart Alva, which are also called dark elves, are the dwarves. They are the underground, but in a different way. So we're talking about mound elves, okay? So we've got this earlier word for these spirits that we interrelate with as being beings from the mound. And likewise, some of the Irish names for them, and I'm mentioning the Irish because that's quite common lore that a lot of people know in modern pagan and magical circles. They're quite common terms. They are also described as being the people of the hills, right? But there's also that thing that term fairy, by whatever spelling, arose from the word fae, which was rooted in the Latin and the French, which just meant magical or fated, similar root to fated, many people will argue. And this term sort of was originally applied at that point to human beings who were magical in some way. They were uncanny, or they had been fated, like touched by fate, right? So they had an uncanniness about them. There's something magical about them, something enchanted. And then this evolved from someone who was enchanted to someone who could enchant, to a person who could do magic. And so you may have heard of Morgan Le Fay. So today we think of her often as Morgan Le Fay, Morgan the Fairy, right? As an otherworldly being. If you look back in those stories, it was Morgan who was magical, an enchantress, someone who could do magic. So this word evolved to a person who was a magical being and then began to be applied from someone who could do magic to someone who was magic by nature, i.e. a fairy, a person, a spirit person. And you'll find in some of the languages, and I think in Scots, right, the word fae sometimes means touched, as in touched by the sight, somehow magical, a human magical person. But it has that connection, right? So the words, those names evolve. But there's something in that thread that tells us a truth about these spirits. The mound elves in the Norse myths were thought to be ancestors, to be the dead who lived in the mounds. There's a beautiful phrase in Elves, Wights and Trolls by Gunderson, who said they were the ancestors, the dead humans, right? Who had reached a state of might, who had like developed slightly beyond just being an ordinary human and had grown in their nature to be a mighty spirit in some sense. And this echoes back to what Robert Kirk was saying about fairies being between man and angel, humans and those divine spirits that are, because angel of course means messenger, so it's coming, bringing the word of the greater divine, of the magic behind the magic. And in the same way, the evolution of the term of magic to human touched by magic, to magical being, also demonstrates another fluidity between humans and the fair folk. So there's this in the language, you can see this shifting and this relationship between human people and fairy people. You can see this root in the living in the mounds as well. So it's common to find the Iron Age burial mounds as being described as fairy mounds in the folklore, as in the home of the fair folk. So the burial mounds, right, these hills that were made by humans where their ancestors, where their beloved dead, where their people were buried, They were the equivalent to uh, graveyards, grave sites. They're grave sites, right? So these mounds, these spaces where the dead live. And then over time, either it was forgotten that that was what they were, or there was this sort of shift in understanding and in the way they were described to say, oh, that's where the fair folk live. Both of which down in the chthonic otherworld. The chthonic, the underground, the deep otherworld, in the earth, in the mound. And it's true that the homes of the fair folk are often the homes of the dead. Now, often the two will live side by side. There are fairy stories and folk tales where a gentleman, perhaps, or shall we say, someone who's had slightly too much to drink in the pub is wandering home late at night, and they meet a fellow on the road who invites them to travel with them and to come round to their home for a nightcap. And so the pair go through a door in the hill, into a luscious underground space that is lit like it is overground, that shines with a light that has no obvious source, filled with beautiful things, with gold and silk and gems, and people, beautiful people. Some might say too beautiful. And our slightly tipsy gentleman begins to wander the halls and finds his old neighbour, Mrs. Sparrow, who died last year. And he's very confused by this. And Mrs. Sparrow says to him, "You do not want to stay, for time passes differently here. Let me show you the way home." And she leads him out again. And it doesn't matter how many times he goes back, he cannot find the door into the mound again. But in these stories, we find that when living humans, enter fairy world, they will often encounter someone that will help them. And sometimes this is an ally. Sometimes this is a fairy that they have done something good for and that they've made friends with beforehand, or that they've treated well beforehand, not knowing who they were. And sometimes it is a member of their community that has died before, that they know, that they recognize, who shows them the way out. So the homes of the fair folk are often the homes of the dead. And there are other clues to this as well. If you want to travel to the land of the Summer Isles, right, the land of the dead in some of the Celtic mythologies, you travel over the Western Seas, and that will take you both to the land of the Fae and the land of the dead. If you travel down through the well, through magical wells and magical springs, it will take you down into the other world. And some stories say it takes you to the land of the dead, and some say it takes you to the land of the Fae. Through water, down into the earth, in the mounds. So we've got this connection. The realm is shared, the world is shared. And there's also many stories that have someone walking around a fairy mound 3 times or 9 times or 13 times. And sometimes the direction is said to be counterclockwise or against the sun. And this is similar again to some of the divination practices that specify, like, circling a graveyard on a specific night at midnight on All Hallows Eve, for example, to summon a vision or a ghost. So there's this connection here between the two, and it runs through so much of the folklore. It goes back as far as Isabel Gowdy. So in her Confessions, and while it is we need to be a little bit cautious about things that people share when they're confessing, right, to under, like, in the witch trials. Isabel Gowdy is an interesting case in that a lot of what she says actually has echoes in the folklore, and she seemed to be quite willing to share quite a lot of information. And one of the things that she talks about is being in the hills, in specifically the Downy Hills, which I believe is a specific location in the area that she lived in. So I was in the Downy Hills and was dined there by the Queen of Faery, more food than I could eat. So she's under the hills and she's eating with the Queen of Faery and the King of Faery and the elf bulls rollicking and roistering up and down. So here again, we get that inkling that it's not always unsafe to eat in the land of the dead. It just depends on the cult in the land of the dead. Well, that too, but in the land of the Fae, it just depends on which culture, right? Which stories and in what way that food is given. There's lots of different reasonings for this. Sometimes it's a case of you should only eat what is offered freely and without obligation, explicitly without obligation, because otherwise you'll end up obligated. You shouldn't steal food and just take whatever's there, right? Because that's not being a good guest. And some say you shouldn't eat of the food of the land under the hills because you become part of the place of which the food you eat. So just as when we eat local food, we eat apples from the tree in our land, we're taking in parts of the land itself and making them part of our bodies. If we go into Faeryland and we eat in Faeryland, maybe we're making our bodies, ourselves, part of that land. So there's different reasons given depending on the story, on the person you talk to. But here, Isabel Gowdy talked about being under the hills, meeting the Queen of Faery, and eating with her. And in specific hills, specific locations, right? So as I've mentioned, there are a few things you might want to be a little bit careful of traveling into the underworld. And I've titled this 100 Years in a Night because there are lots of stories of people, unwitting humans, entering into Faeryland or a fairy circle because they followed the music and they've walked into a circle of toadstools of mushrooms and they've found themselves in a fairy party and they've danced for just one night. Or like our tipsy gentleman after a nightcap led out of the hill by Mrs. Sparrow, who encouraged him not to stay for any longer than he already had. When they return to the human world, if they stay all night until the dawn, they find that 100 years have passed. Now, 100 years, of course, is a word, a term describing a long time, longer than a human life normally has any right to be. So it's suggesting here that that time moves differently there. It's possible to get lost there. There are risks involved. Some of the folklore, such as in the Scottish border ballad of Tamlin, has humans being kidnapped and needing to be rescued, right? And sometimes you might encounter a spirit that is inhospitable. Not every spirit in every place we go wants to work with us or is friendly to us. So if you're going to be exploring and going and looking for that connection, looking in those places to see those connections between the ancestors and the fair folk, as we're going to do a journey for that in a little bit, it's worth knowing some protection charms. So I'm going to share with you some things that you can take for in your own practice and that you can consider. So traditional things that you can do and that you can use is iron or steel. For whatever reason, iron and steel, which contains iron, is often said to hurt spirits. So if you are traveling in these places, if you are reaching out to these beings, then keep it wrapped, keep it hidden if you're carrying it with you at all, right? Don't go waving it around, because that's not a good way of introducing yourself. And this is one of the sort of things about being a guest in someone's home, if you're visiting someone's realm, or if you're inviting someone to come and join you in your circle, right? You want to be a good host or a good guest, because those rules of hospitality are that as long as you are a good guest, your host has a duty to be a good host. So don't wander into a fairy mound waving a sword around, or a knife, or a nail for that matter. But if you are wanting to brush up against the edge of these places, or if you have a tendency of drifting off, which some of us do, carrying an iron nail in your pocket may not be the worst thing. On the flip side, if you find it difficult to get into a state of trance or to meet the fair folk, you might want to check and see if you're carrying any metal that you shouldn't be. Like, my watch is made of metal. I have screws in my glasses. Right? If you find it really difficult, removing those things can help. Something like silver or gold, often less of an issue. Although, for me personally, and this is a personal thing, not a thing for everyone, I was actually told that gold, if I wear gold, that is likely to keep me more here, right? And stop me from traveling, whereas silver is okay. For other people, wearing gold is fine. So there's a little bit, as you meet beings, as you work with spirits, you may find that you get given certain bits of information about your relationship with them. Another traditional charm is red rowan berries threaded on a red thread. That generally protects against harmful magic. You can also use a religious protective symbol or prayer from your faith. So if you are a Christian, you might have a cross or say the Lord's Prayer. If you are pagan, then perhaps you have another protective symbol in your particular path that you can use. You can also use the cross if you vibe with it. Or perhaps there's a prayer that you call on for protection. Like, I have a song that I sing to my Discia, to my protective ancestors. And they will come when I call and offer that protection. So it's worth having a think, like, what are your protective symbols and your protective prayers? And they will work in general, right? And if you feel like you're being pixie led, again, a traditional thing to do is to turn your coat or your shirt inside out if you are getting lost in the woods. And the same principle can apply to if you are the kind of person who easily slips into trance and you find yourself getting lost in daydreams. You might find that you want to have something that you can wear that you can turn inside out easily, so that when you find yourself getting lost in those daydreams and lost in that sort of trance world, and you feel like you're being mentally pixie led, try turning that inside out. Whether that's a shirt, a headband, a pair of mittens if your hands get cold. Yeah. Or even a pair of socks. If you're at home, that's much easier than if you're walking about with your shoes on. So other things that can protect you are to, again, we're coming back to the power of names. If they ask for your name, give a nickname. Say, you may call me Halo. Be truthful, be honest, and pay attention as you go through. Because, again, that's part of being a good guest. Treat them with respect and treat the land without entitlement. The world that we share with them, do your best. None of us are perfect, but we can do our best to be in good relationship with the spirits and with the land. If you mess up, consider how to make amends. Ask them how to make amends. And I've included this in there, like, because some people don't want to go and interact with the fair folk, but I'm assuming that if you're here, you feel a calling to work with them or a curiosity to work with them. And there is a saying that, again from Robert Kirk, if you call their names, they will easily come. And this is something, an old folklore that is true across the board. One of the reasons that people use all sorts of nicknames for the fair folk, the good neighbors, mother's blessing, the shining ones, right, is because it is said that if you say their name, they may hear you because they are invisible, and their name will carry on the wind where they live. So they can be anywhere and they may hear you and they will turn their attention to you. I mean, wouldn't you if you heard your name being called? So if you don't want their attention, avoid mentioning them or talk about them using one of their nicknames. I'm very fond of them, so I'm not terribly worried about saying the word fairy. Just as an aside on that one, some people consider that to be a disrespectful term. And again, if you encounter the spirits that you encounter, if they feel that way, then you may consider not calling them fairies. Others don't seem to mind. Cool. So all that said, the kind of journeying that we're going to do now is going to be a guided visualization. And we're going to take a path that is well worn, and it's unusual for people to have any real trouble when taking this kind of journey, because these paths are well worn, because they're inscribed in the imaginative realm and the astral realm, in those energetic spaces, and so they are nice and steady. In this instance, you'll be traveling with a guide, me. And if at any point you want to come back because you're like, actually, no, I'm done, then that's completely fine. The way that I would recommend doing that is gently taking a breath. And as you breathe out, you feel your spine and sigh. And then take a moment to imagine yourself bathed in a cleansing light. Here in the space that you're in, and then open your eyes. You can feel into your toes, into your fingers. You can pat yourself down if you want to, like whatever helps you feel back. Yeah, at any point you want to come back, remember that your body is your spirit's home. So you are strongly connected to it. One of the things that I was taught is that our physicality is a powerful thing and can trump almost any energetic aspect, because the physical is dense energy. So this is where the most power is, where the most energy is. So if you're off traveling, you can come home to your body. Okay. So I invite you to take a moment to just be comfortable. And if anyone here live has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I just take a sip of my tea. And we're going to go on a guided journey to the mound. And we're seeking out the mound in this inner world, astral world, in this space, however you view your journeying, as being a point, a focal point for where the fair folk and the dead who are fond of us, where they live, where we can meet them, where we can go and learn something about this relationship between the dead, the ancestors, and the fair folk, and perhaps our ancestors and the fair folk. And I'm hoping that your question has been answered and that by the dead, I do mean our ancestors, but not in a limited sense. Not in the sense of blood ancestors in the people that you know of as being in your family line, but ancestors in as much as all human beings are our ancestors, all human beings that have gone before are our ancestors in one way, shape, or form, whether that is by being in our embodied family lineage or being part of the world, the part of shaping the world that we live in, part of our spiritual lineage, part of our creative lineages. We are all ultimately related in one way, shape, or form. One of the reasons that I've used the term the dead instead of the ancestors is because people often think it means immediate family, and we don't always have good relationships with our immediate family or recent dead. So this is leaving that space a little bit more open. Any questions have come up for you and you're watching on the replay, then comment below and let me know. If you come into the Enchanted Academy community, then there's space to have conversations around this. And when I can, I will respond to comments on this. So for now, let's begin to move forwards with our journey. So I invite you to take a breath and to get yourself comfortable. And let your breath be easy. Might be a little deeper on your next breath than you normally do. And as you breathe out, perhaps you let it out with a little sigh. As you breathe, let each breath just bring you to the here and now. Each breath in, bring your awareness to this moment, to this place. With each breath out, begin to relax, to rest into this moment. Breathe in your own time. And now in your own time. With each breath, feel yourself resting down upon the earth. And let yourself be aware of your body as much as is comfortable for you. Just bring your awareness to this place and time. As you breathe out, imagine that you are settling down, sinking down just a little to feel the pressure of yourself pulled down by gravity. The earth pressing up, supporting you, holding you. On your next breath, as you breathe out, imagine you are rooting down into the earth. You have a root or an anchor, cord or beam of light even, that is sinking down slowly through the whatever it is that you're sat or led or stood upon, down through the foundations of whatever building you're in, down through the rock, the soil, the clay, the gravel, whatever it is that is beneath you. With each breath, root down deeper past the stones and the bones, down into the earth. And as you imagine that root traveling deeper, that connection traveling deeper, perhaps you notice waterways and caverns beneath you. Perhaps you notice the warmth of the molten rock beneath the surface of the earth. Perhaps you notice the soil near the surface, rich and nourishing. So you root down into the earth, deep into the earth. Perhaps you root down just into that surface layer, into the rocks, and the stone and the soil. Or perhaps you go deep down and down through the molten layers, down into the iron at the core of the earth. That fire at the center of the earth. It reminds you that you are alive, that you are manifest, that you are physical, that you are of the earth. Just take a few breaths to feel that connection with the earth. On your next breath, feeling that power in the earth, the strength and the support of the earth that holds you. As you breathe in, imagine it rising up through your roots, rising up into your space, into your body. And let the strength and the nourishment of the earth, the soil and stone and bone, the fire at the center of the earth, the strength of it, the earth of it. With each breath in, breathe it up. And imagine it rises up into your body, into your space, holding you, lending you its strength and support. And you can imagine that you're breathing that in with each breath, letting it hold you and fill you, letting it strengthen you and support you as much as you need. As you breathe up and your awareness rises up through your body with the energy of the earth, up through your space, as you reach your heart, turn your awareness up. And as you breathe up, breathe out, imagine that you are sending a connection up. Perhaps you imagine branches rising or a cord rising up, or a beam of light that reaches up through the crown of your head, up through your space, up through any building you are in, up through the atmosphere, up past the clouds, up past the daylight or the moonlight or the dark of the night, up past those layers of atmosphere and up into space, up into those higher reaches. And as you reach up, feel your awareness expand and notice high above the light of the stars, the dreams of the ancients, and through the stars all the stories ever told have been woven. All the stories of the dead that our ancestors have told, that those who came before us have told. You are reaching up with each breath, higher and higher into that starlight, into that guidance and wisdom of the stories and the stars, up into that expansion. Feel yourself connecting into that. And take a couple of breaths just to feel that connection. And on your next breath in, imagine that light, that guidance, that wisdom begin to spiral down, flow down, down into your space, down through the atmosphere, down through the roof of any building you're in, down through your crown, down into your body, into your space, washing over you, flowing into you. Imagine yourself breathing it in through that connection down into your heart where it meets the strength of the earth. And let that light of the stars flow down into the earth through you, and the strength of the earth flow up into the stars through you. Just take a couple of breaths, imagining, feeling that you are connected to earth and stars. You are connected to this world, both its manifest, dense, physical parts and its bright, expansive, wise parts. You notice that there is strength and wisdom in both. And they meet in you. You are a child of the earth and the stars. And here where they meet is a liminal space, between space. You're between the surface of the earth and the sky. You are in between. And perhaps you notice, you remember that in the direction that the sun rises from where you are now, it's the east. And the sun will rise overhead and will set towards the west. And round from the east. In the northern hemisphere, if you follow the sun, it travels south. The noonday sun sits in the south. You notice where that is in relation to you now. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, well, the noonday sun is in the north. You notice that too. And perhaps you notice that cross line, that crossroads. There is east to west. And there is a sun at midday. And there is a space where the sun never is. In the northern hemisphere, that is the north, point of midnight. In the southern hemisphere, that is the south, the point of midnight. But here in this land, in this liminal space between sky and earth, is another liminal space, a crossroads between sunrise and sunset, between high noon and midnight. And you are at the center of it. As you breathe, you rest in this liminal space. Imagine that you can see that crossroads. Imagine that you can feel that crossroads. From east to west and north to south. above and below, the point where you are at the center. And here at that crossroads, imagine that you turn towards the west. You notice that the path to the west leads out. And perhaps you can see or you can hear water flowing. There is water in the west. Perhaps it is the water of the sea. Perhaps it is a river or a spring. You're not sure, perhaps, but you know that it is there. And I invite you to begin to travel down that western road with me. Travel down towards the west, along the path, through a landscape of water. Path carries you safely into this watery realm. No matter how far you go, as long as you stay on this path, you are safe. You can breathe, you can move, you can travel through unhindered. Notice what you notice about this landscape of water. Notice what you can see. What can you hear? What can you smell? What can you feel? And perhaps you can feel, perhaps you catch a glimpse of the guides that travel with us, the guardians that travel with us, that bring our group on this journey out of time, out of space, into the west. And as you travel through this watery realm, up ahead, you notice a bridge that the path travels over, and beyond the bridge is a mound, a hill that is an odd shape. You know this was built by people, whether human people or fairy people or god people. Do not know. You reach the bridge. You choose whether to cross or stay. And perhaps if you come with us across the bridge, perhaps you meet a guardian there. Perhaps you meet the keeper of the bridge there. Notice what they look like. Take a moment to acknowledge them. As they gesture for you to go past, to go on to the mound. The path leads up to the door of the mound. The door is closed. We wait here at the door to the mound. We remember that sometimes you need to circle the mound. And so we turn to the right to circle the mound counterclockwise, and all together we go around. And though the mound may be big or small, we go around fast, swiftly, smoothly, round it once, back to the path. Feels strange to travel in the blink of an eye. We go round again, in one breath, travelling round the mound twice back to the path. All together, we travel round again a third time, on one breath. Back to the door, where I knock 3 times. The door swings open. And just inside the door are a pair. One of the human dead, one of our ancestors, and one of the fair folk. And they step out through the door. And they speak to you. You have traveled to ask a question, to find out about us, they say. And so you may ask, and we will answer. Take some time to speak with the pair that meet you here. The pair indicate that it is time for them to return into the mound. Say your farewells. And perhaps they have a token for you or a final few words. Perhaps you have some words for them. Take a few more breaths to say your farewells. They return through the door. The door closes behind them. And we begin our circuits round the mound again, this time turning to our left. On the first breath, round swiftly all together and back to the door. On the second breath, round swiftly all together and back to the door, back to the path. On the third breath, round swiftly all together and back to the door, back to the path, back held by our guides, by the guides on this way. We turn back and begin to travel east along the path, leaving the mound behind us. We find ourselves at the bridge keeper, greeting them, acknowledging them as they wave us past. We cross the bridge, and the journey back is swifter than the journey here, but it is the same path. We travel along all together through this watery realm. Notice what you notice. Is it the same, or have things changed? You carry new wisdom, a new encounter, as you journey through the land in the west, through this watery world, through the sounds and the scents and the sights, back and back to the crossroads, back to the here and now. Travel back and back along to the east, to the center. Swiftly, swiftly, here we are, back at the crossroads. You find yourself. The last of our group, straggling behind, find themselves gathered up, back at the crossroads. We bow to the west and the east, to the south and the north. With a breath, as you breathe in, feel yourself coming to this center, to this crossroads. And as you breathe out, let yourself rest here and now, and feel the paths to the east and the west and the south and the north begin to fade from your awareness. With gratitude to the guides and the guardians that have held us in this journey, they fade from your awareness too. The other members of the group fade from your awareness until you find yourself just here at the crossroads, at the point of connection between earth and sky. You breathe in and feel yourself rooted down into the earth. Breathe out. Feel yourself resting there on the earth. Breathe in and feel that connection to the sky. As you breathe out, let that sky energy settle. If you need a little more, let a little more flow in. If you need a little less, let a little bit flow out. Let that connection, your awareness of it, begin to fade. until you are resting on the earth, whole and complete. You are still connected to the earth and the sky. The crossroads is just a breath away. For you are an earth child and a sky child. You're a being of both and of this space in between. And for now, take a breath. A nice deep breath, and feel your body, feel your space. And as you breathe out, feel the place where you stand or sit or lie. Feel the place where you are. With your next breath, really feel that air coming into your lungs and flowing out of your lungs, and feel yourself settling on the earth, settling back into the here and now. Take one more breath. Just let anything that you want to hold on to, that you need to keep, that is yours, that you've learned or gained, or that is yours already. Breathe that in, and as you breathe out, let anything you do not need in this moment fade away. And perhaps you might like to place a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly, 2 hands on your heart if you prefer. Just feel your physical self, your body, the edges of yourself. If you want to, you can pat yourself down or rub yourself or give yourself a hug. You might want to shake, wiggle your toes or your fingers, or your shoulders or your hips, or just feel into your spine. And come back to yourself, to the here and now. So I want to remind you, after any kind of journey, any kind of magical work, it's really important to ground yourself. So always remember to take a moment to feel yourself back where you began. Because while we are connected to the fair folk, while we do live in a world of spirits, we are also physical embodied beings with a mundane life, a tangible life that we need to live. So just take that moment to feel yourself back where you began, connected to the earth, in your body as is comfortable for you. And I recommend that you make any notes that you need, drink some water or tea, have a snack, and do something mundane afterwards. So, what next? Write down your experience, and if you've promised or agreed to do anything, or if you were given any information, like remember to make a note of that, and make sure that you do anything that you've said you'll do. That's a really good point of start and point in building your relationship with these beings and with yourself and with the spirits, because the spirits, like, they recognize if you are keeping your word, and they appreciate that. So you might want to, if you have an ancestor altar, or if you feel inclined to like build that relationship with them, you might want to start an altar for them. You might want to clean it and refresh it with this new understanding in mind of their connection with the fair folk. You may wish to make an offering to the Fae where you live, something that is biodegradable, something that is suitable for giving on the land. So water, milk, ale is quite traditional, bread. Remember to be careful of what you leave. So if you're putting out milk or cream, don't leave it somewhere where hedgehogs or cats or any of your local fauna, fauna, I was going to say fauna or flora, but where they can drink it, because many animals are lactose intolerant. Don't leave chocolate out because that's toxic to a lot of creatures. But so have a think about what you want to offer. You might want to offer a song or a story or to read a poem for them. And then listen to the response and see what happens. Get to know your local spirits. And if you can't get out physically out into the land, if you can't get out into wild place, don't go into too wild a place, stay safe. Go into your garden, or even just open your window or sit with a pot plant and connect into that energy in that space. Do what you can. Okay. And if you can, find stories about them and get to know them better. So I'd also like to remind you that if you're not already in the Enchanted Academy, I know those of you that are live here today are part of the Academy, so you can come into the fairy ring and have conversations, start conversations, share about what you've learned today, share on the replay for this. If you're not a member, you can join at haloquin.net/T. The links will be in the description as well. And it's a free community that you can engage in and share your experiences and share with each other. I also have the next class that will be in the Enchanted Academy will be a special introduction to the goddess Babylon. Not fairy themed, I know, but this is something that may interest some of you. And the goddess Babylon is, well, you can find out more about her on my blog and in the community. Talked about her a bit over the years. So that will be on the 16th of June, 2025 at 8 p.m. UK time. So sign up for the Zoom link and for updates on Babylon related things. But if you're looking for more fairy things, I have books available. All That Glitters is poetry and prose, so it's a creative writing exploration with lots of folklore and bits from my personal experience. Your Faery Magic was my first book that I had published on fairy magic, so it's not how I'd write it now, but there are some absolute gems in there. And Folktales, Fairies and Spirits dives into the exploration of how do you find out about fairy magic through the stories and the folk tales of Northern Europe, but also of your own landscape. So I talk about that. So you can find all of those on my website. I also have a fairy magic course. So you can do this is a primarily self-study course, but there is support as well available if you would like to, if you have any questions or anything comes up. So we're talking about what I mean by folkloric fairy magic, keys to the otherworld. We talk about a traditional fairy tree, the hawthorn, and what to do if you don't have a hawthorn in your land, how to meet the fairy hound spirits, and how to begin building a relationship with the fair folk. So if you're very new, that's a good place to start. And that is actually included in the Elemental Library, which also has all sorts of other bits and pieces going on. There are several self-study courses, the Foundations of Witchcraft, Elemental Magic, for getting all of those basics in and learning like some of those fundamentals that you may have skipped. So Foundations of Witchcraft is really good for solo practitioners, and Elemental Magic can dive deeper into working with the elements, different tools, and also ritual craft. And there are lots of masterclasses in there. So there's grounding fundamentals, there's a masterclass on shape-shifting, on the magic of the voice, and of course, the folkloric fairy magic. The Elemental Library is available for people to join for $19.99 a month. But if you are here live, then I have a special offer for you on, just grabbing the link, the Enchanter's Circle. So the Enchanter's Circle also includes the Elemental Library and live classes. So there's all of the self-study classes and master classes, but there's also the classes on the Cauldron of Arwen, which is just coming to an end in our live circle. The deities of love and passion. So lots of different things there. And In the next couple of months, we're going to be starting a new series of courses. So there'll be 13 Moons of Witchcraft, which will be diving into a live class each month on an aspect of embodied witchcraft and like practical skills in witchcraft. And we'll do some magic together in those classes. There's also going to be a class each month on enchanted tales, so exploring the magic of story and the magic in stories. So we're going to have sessions on elemental stories, on like fire stories and the magic of fire through the tales, on planetary stories. There's going to be all sorts, and spirits. And I will also be taking requests on themes for those as well. And we're also like, this is going to be officially announced in the next class. I'm going to be doing Babylon circles, so working with Babylon each month, and then later in the summer I'll be launching the DIY Tarot Club. So there's loads going on in the Enchanters Circle, and everything has recordings as well. So if you can't make things live, or if you want to like do things at a different pace, then you can also engage with that. And for those of you that are here live in the chat, there is an option to join the Enchanter Circle at with 25% off for you. So feel free to check that out and have a look at all the different options going on there. So I hope that you will join me in the Enchanted Academy, and that you've enjoyed this dive into fairies and the dead. And I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in the folkloric fairy magic class. And let me know if you have my books and what you think of them, and if there's any topic in there that you'd like us to explore more deeply in a later class. And for those of you that are just finding me new, come and check out my work. I share a lot for free so that you can get a taste of it. And if you like it, then you can come along and join the deeper classes. And I do offer scholarships because I want this work to be accessible to people. So if you're called to any of this and you are financially struggling for whatever reason, then get in touch. Let me know. I've been there. I know what it's like. And I want to have you in my classes, coming and joining and doing magic. So let's chat. We'll work it out. So do share in the comments below what you think about this connection between the fair folk and the dead, and what you'll be doing next to build up your relationship and explore this relationship with the fair folk. There are resources, and you can find these slides and recommended reading at haloquin.net/resources. So until next time, thank you, and I'll see you in the Enchanted Academy.